At Cancelber's school, the owl teacher, Miss Hoot assigned Sid and Sally, the autistic yellow teddy bear twins and their classmates to write their own stories. Sid and Sally were very excited about the task. They both loved nothing more than making up stories and using their imaginations. The Teddy twins and the rest of the class immediately got to work, their minds racing with ideas and their pencils scribbling away on their papers. However, one of their classmates, Jimbo the otter, seemed to be struggling to come up with an idea for his story. Miss Hoot noticed Jimbo's distress and approached him with concern. "Are you okay over there, Jimbo?" Miss Hoot asked gently. "I wish I was," Jimbo muttered, staring blankly at his paper. Miss Hoot reassured him. "Just take your time, Jimbo. I'm sure you'll come up with something great to write about." But try as he might, Jimbo couldn't seem to find inspiration. Frustration began to build up inside him, and suddenly, he erupted in a fit of rage. He shot up from his seat and threw his desk across the room, shocking everyone in the class. Everyone gasped in disbelief, except for Sid and Sally, who were struggling to contain their laughter at the outrageous scene unfolding before them. "I can't do it," Jimbo cried out as he ran out of the classroom in a frenzy, leaving his classmates and teacher speechless. While Miss Hoot went after Jimbo, Sid and Sally stifled their giggles as they heard Jimbo's exasperated cries and Miss Hoot's flustered voice echoing down the hallway. The twins always found it funny and laughed when a student in their class had an outburst, but they couldn't help it. It was just their autism, making even the serious incidents seem hilarious to them. Just then, Sid had a mischievous idea. He decided to write a story about Jimbo's outburst, finding humor in the chaotic situation that had unfolded. But, little did Sid know, that his idea would lead to a shocking turn of events. When Miss Hoot returned back to the classroom with a calmer Jimbo in tow, the students had all finished their stories. Each one put their finished tales on Miss Hoot's desk, eager for her to read them aloud. As she began to read each story, laughter filled the room, with most of the tales turning out to be humorous and lighthearted. Miss Hoot was very impressed with all of the students' creativity. When Miss Hoot came across Sid's story titled, "The Classroom Outburst," she was intrigued. As she began to read the story, the class listened intently, with Sid snickering and rubbing his hands mischievously, which made his sister, Sally, giggle at him innocently. Miss Hoot cleared her throat and started to read Sid's story. One day, the owl teacher began, "There was a funny little otter named Jimbo." She read, realizing that this story she was reading was about her student, Jimbo. She cautiously looked at Jimbo's direction, gulping as she noticed the embarrassed look on his face. She turned to Sid's story, carefully reading out the words. "Jimbo was known for his chaotic demeanor," Miss Hoot continued. "He always knew how to entertain his classmates with his hilarious outbursts, hysterical meltdowns, and amusing rampages." Miss Hoot was taken aback by what she was reading. She gasped as she anxiously turned to Jimbo, wondering how he was going to react. All the students couldn't help but burst into laughter at both the story they were hearing, and Jimbo's priceless reaction. Jimbo was mortified by being mentioned about his earlier outburst in the story. His mouth widened open and his whole face turned bright red, frozen with embarrassment. Miss Hoot, seeing Jimbo's distress, immediately stopped reading and went over to him to make sure he was okay. The classroom went silent for a moment as everyone looked at Jimbo, who was frozen in shock. Some of the students whispered to each other, concerned for their classmate, while other students took cover, just in case if Jimbo lashed out again. But, instead of rampaging again, Jimbo suddenly fainted, collapsing onto the floor in front of his classmates. Miss Hoot yelped in shock and sprang into action. She quickly rushed out of the classroom, making her way to the first aid room to fetch the school nurse to Jimbo. Some of the classmates gasped in disbelief, while other students rushed to Jimbo's side, trying to wake him up. Amidst the chaos, Sid and Sally couldn't help but feel guilty for causing this to happen to Jimbo. Sid soon realized his mistake as his story had embarrassed his classmate. However, despite their remorse, they couldn't help but find the situation hilariously entertaining. It was just like being in a comedy show, with everyone in the classroom running around in a panic, trying to revive their classmate. The whole thing was just too much for Sid and Sally. Eventually, the Teddy twins couldn't hold in their laughter anymore as they dashed out of the classroom and into the school bathrooms, so they can let it all out and laugh as loudly as they wanted. Sid and Sally felt freedom as they finally let all of their laughter out in the bathrooms, where nobody can hear them. It had probably been one of the best school days they'd ever had. Thanks to Jimbo and his hilarious antics, Sid and Sally had the time of their lives that day. It was a school day they'd never forget, and, on the drive home, Mama Bear and Papa Bear chuckled when they heard their two kids giggling together in the back of the car. They didn't know what Sid and Sally were laughing about, but the sounds of the twins' laughter put a smile to their faces. And, when they got home, all of the laughter caused both Sid and Sally to get the hiccups, causing their parents to burst into laughter themselves. Now, Sid and Sally finally knew how Jimbo felt when they laughed at him. Well, Sally, I guess we learned our lesson today. Hiccup Sid. What's that, Sid? Sally asked between hiccups. Sid paused for a second before responding. Empathy, he replied, his hiccups making him tumble to the floor. The end.